Welcome back to the 1%ers podcast, where we unearth the small changes that make a big impact on the journey towards peak performance. I'm your host, Tim Buxton, coming to you from Combermary country on the Gold Coast. And together with my co-host, Mario Buchs, we'll be exploring the unseen edges of peak performance to guide athletes, teams, organizations, and leaders across various disciplines to unlock their exponential edge. So, without further ado, let's dive again in and find out that 1% that changes everything.
We're back.
Hey!
Not only did we survive the first one, we even made it to the second one. So we're still as excited, maybe even more excited, because we know what's coming today. So first and foremost, welcome everybody, welcome back. You've gone through the first session where we spoke a little bit about me. Today it's all about Tim, the master and the brains behind the 1%ers, the podcast, where small changes make a very huge impact. This is what this is all about. But before we jump into the 1%ers, today we're going to talk about Tim Buxton. Tim, welcome.
Thanks, Mario. Mate, I thoroughly enjoyed our chat last week, delving into your story. And we haven't really prepped. I don't know what exact questions you're going to ask me, so I'm excited to see where we go with my story. But yeah, so good to be back. And I'm definitely far more excited than I was last week even. It's a good thing we've got going here, mate.
I think so too. We'll keep this going. So, Tim, what do you reckon? Let's get rolling, huh? Question. What makes you, Tim Buxton?
Wow. What makes me me? Well, as soon as you said that, I glance at this photo behind me, or in front of me actually, which is I'm staring at. In fact, I'll try and grab it here. You know, if you're going to be watching this, it'll make sense. But if you're on audio, you won't see this photo. But it is a little photo of me in the jungles of Irian Jaya, which is West Papua, an Indonesian province still, though it's part of the big island of New Guinea. And it's me as a baby growing up, the only white little boy in this village. My brothers and sisters were older and they were off in a boarding school while my parents were working deep in the jungles with the Dani people. And when I think about what makes me me, I kind of go back to, I guess, maybe not the memories I can cognitively remember, but I think the memories that, and those early years of my life that I think formed a lot of my persuasion, I guess, my personality and who I am. First and foremost, I love adventure. I don't like being hemmed into or boxed in. I love to wander and get lost. In fact, I couldn't count. You'd lose count the amount of times my parents said I just got lost, and like I either had to call the police and find out where Tim is, or I'd wandered off, climbed our 6-foot fence as a 3-year-old with my little tricycle and gone 4Ks to the local butchers where I knew I could get my free Fritz, they called it in South Australia. It was like a bologna kind of thing. This was just my personality is to just go on adventures and get lost. And I guess being the youngest of 4 kids, I think I was used to not being bullied, but used to being just the free range chicken. No one really cared much for, my priorities were always the last, I guess you could say, in the line of the family. So a bit of an underdog, I guess, chip on my shoulder, which has kind of led me to, I guess, the path that I've led in my career of just wanting to fight for the little guys. And I'm not really a big stature. If you meet me, I'm on the smaller side of things, but
you've got an aura, mate.
Pardon?
You've got an aura that makes you large. You don't have to be big in stature, but if you've got an aura and a personality, a good personality, then size does not matter at all.
Yeah. Yeah, but I definitely think it's been something I feel like I've had to prove myself, and I think in the realm of just wanting to to be the most courageous I can be in life and to include others along the way that might have had a similar journey and felt, like they didn't have someone to fend for them as well. So hence the work with refugee work and the adventures that's taken us over the last 20 plus years.
Yeah, that brings me to the next, not subject, but maybe question, but I'll get to that in a minute. When we met, it's like, there was this immediate connection because we're quite similar when it comes to Wanderlust, and it's one of those it's one of those better German words, I think, that the English just kind of took over, which is very unique. I mean, I love languages, as you know, and for a German word to flow into English is very unique. There's a few of these words.
Wanderlust, like
Wanderlust is German. It's a German word. Yeah.
Get out! I did not know that. I love that.
Yeah. So because English is such a great language with such a great vocabulary. Look, don't count on. I might not be right here, but I think English has more words than German, and I speak both languages fluently. So it's just, you can express yourself very well in English. But to Schadenfreude is another one,
I love Schadenfreude.
That's another German word. That there's no English thing. But when we met, it was like, wow, it's like, this guy's kind of like me because, like I explained last time in the first podcast, I've been in a lot of places as well, and it's always the adventure. It's a matter of just, let's try it out, There's never that perfect time to fly anywhere, right? There's never that perfect time, so you just have to do it. So, your Wanderlust took you to a place called northern Iraq in the middle of a war, okay? Not as a soldier, okay? So you had no weapon, you had no license to hold a weapon or defend anybody or anything. You just upped your sticks in Australia and decided, that's it, I need to go there. Not only did you go, you took your family with you. So just tell the audience how that materializes, because that's unique. I have the utmost respect for something like that. And having met you and your family, and I said that earlier, I think probably the best thing they've ever done. They're so mature, your kids, even the youngest is more mature than many other children, 2 or 3 years older. So I think it's the best thing. Just explain how this came about, please.
Yeah, look, it is, one of those things where you just follow your North Star, and sometimes it happens overnight. Other times it takes a few years to get there, and this was one of those few years journey. I was actually living in New York with my family. My wife is a New Yorker, native New Yorker. We had a couple of kids already. I was traveling the world doing work in disaster zones, responding to emergencies on short-term missions with whether it be doctors, construction workers, trades, various people, working in a wide variety of humanitarian responses. And it was on a scouting trip. I'd traveled through the Middle East and gone through to Iraq to visit a group that we had been partnering with at the time. No one in the office I was working in would go. And you could say I drew the short straw, but for me that was like, yes, like I get to go to this crazy place that everyone thinks you can't go to. And the only person that was probably not so happy was my wife, who was pregnant with number 1 at the time, our first one. So this was back in 2010. And it was a few years after that first initial trip where I was like, so much needs to be done. The devastation of ongoing war and this part of the world, people think it's a lost cause. And I'm like, no, we can do so much. And just one person there can actually have an incredible impact. And 3 years later, after that first trip, my wife said, let's go. And she's an adventurer in her own right, spent many years working in Africa before we'd even met, working with AIDS orphans and other vulnerable children. So we ended up packing our 3 kids. At the time, our youngest, Lily, was 9 weeks old. And the other 2 were just little toddlers. And we jumped on that plane. It happened to be the same day that we landed was the same day that ISIS invaded Iraq. So literally 50 kilometers away, they steamed across the border with all their tanks and took the second largest city of Iraq, the city of Mosul, which was just 50 kilometers from the airport we flew into in Erbil, and everything changed. We didn't even know really who ISIS was. They were this unknown group, and suddenly overnight they shot to infamy, and the whole world was put on notice that the Islamic Caliphate was expanding. And overnight, 2 million refugees flooded into our doorstep and ultimately into our care for the next 3.5 years. We stayed there through some pretty tumultuous times, but with the incredible support of the local community that we were embedded with. They protected us, cared for us, loved us, welcomed us. And, like you said, probably some of the most incredible years of our family's life, moments and experiences we miss so much, even to this day. We're grateful for Australia and the freedoms and the luxuries, really, that we enjoy, and yet somehow miss so much the richness of community, of culture, of people that are just so grateful. And, you know, look, they live in a very beautiful, beautiful part of the world. I mean, parts of it looks like Switzerland, my friend. It's in the Zagros Mountains we lived. So, yeah, you could have said we arrived in the worst of times, but it feels like now looking back, we saw what the incredible people of Iraq are made of, and they've changed my life and inspired me to this day. They and their resilience, their courage, their compassion are what drives the work that I do now here in Australia, helping the refugees that finally do make it to safety on Australia's shores.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, thank you so much for opening up and telling the audience and me why you did it, how you did it, and how important it is to you, and that it's not just a one-off situation. I know it's not your comfort zone talking about yourself, but it's important for the audience to understand where the 1% this actually comes from. Why this is not just 3 words that we came up with over a beer. We put our heads together and said, hey, how can we help communities? How can we help teams? How can we help corporates? How can we help cultures? You know, we have a similar background in a way where, you know, we've seen a lot of things. We've seen beauty, you know, and, you know, I wouldn't change my life for anything. You know, we all make mistakes, but I would make most of them again just because the outcome was great. And hearing what you're saying, you went there, you know, probably on the worst day you could have chosen. But inevitably, it turns out that it was the best time to land, because the work that you wanted to do had to be done immediately. As soon as you got off the plane, you had to obviously make sure your family was safe, and you were kind of safe. But then the work started. So there's no apprenticeship, and no warm-up period. And that's obviously what you know, your character. And that's, you know, that crystallizes out of all these discussions that we've had in the past as well. So yeah, so this is just for the audience to understand that we don't just talk about ourselves. There's a lot of essence behind what we want to do in the future. And from the next podcast on, we will of course delve more into little details of how we can create, you know, high performers, be it at work, be it in sports, be it in any way, shape or form. The other thing that we were thinking about, you know, a few weeks ago or a couple of weeks ago, I don't know the date exactly, and I should, but I do apologize to everybody, and I don't want to offend anyone. We had Remembrance Day. You know, having lived in the UK, I know it's important there. You know, people put a poppy on. It's related to the First World War in Australia and New Zealand Army Corps. That's, you know, they always have to help one another. So we recognize people who went to war. But these people went to fight. You didn't go to fight, but you went to war. You were closer than anybody I've ever known at war. You know, my grandfathers were at war as well. Switzerland in the Second World War, we had to defend our borders, but that's nothing in comparison to what you went through. And I have a few friends in the UK who went to the Falkland Islands and things like that. But I think you and your family, you went to war without a gun. So I would also like to just get your take on, do we want to remember people like that as well, you know. We're talking Red Cross, Blue Helmets, and so on. And I don't want to talk about armies and stuff. That's not my thing. But I think sometimes we forget that people who don't fight have a tougher fight, and it's a 24/7 operation as well. I just want to get your take on this.
Yeah, I think, there's something incredible. And if you would speak to anybody, I think that did fight I know this in Australian culture, in the Anzacs, as an Australian New Zealand Army Corps, you hear a lot. I went and fought for my mate, the guy beside me. I went and fought for my family, and yes, we can fight for also the flag, the country that and values that we love and represent. But there's, I think, something deep down to the core of, I think, the values of humans and those that actually go to sacrifice for something much, I think, deeper. I think of journalists, they go because they're passionate for the truth and to convey the truth to people far away of what's really happening, not just what is convenient or what is an agenda of different sides of politics, those wanting power. There's something that makes them go without guns, but with a pen in hand and convey that truth and risk their life for that. And they do people worth listening to, because if you've gone and risked your life, the chances of you just making nonsense up is probably going to be fairly low. Then there's obviously those that go in with, like you said, with medical doctors and medical care to rescue and help, and obviously in the work that we were doing, falling into the category of humanitarian work, and you go for the stranger, you go for the person, for humanity. You don't. There's not there's something proud, obviously, to be an Australian, but I was born in Indonesia. I've got British parents. I married an American. Goodness me, I couldn't, and you can relate to this. It's hard to even be patriotic about one particular country. My kids are the same, American, Australian. They don't even know who to go for in the Olympics half the time.
Tough for them, yeah, I know. My daughter has the same problem. She yells out but it's good for them, They'll get a lot of medals.
Yeah, the reality, I guess the point is, there's a lot of honor that goes to people that fight for their country. Most often don't choose. They didn't choose to fight. They went for other reasons. And I think it really is. It made me wonder. I used to do a lot just of thinking, coming back to Australia and I didn't really feel like where I belonged, and no one could really relate to what I'd seen, experienced, what my work is in here on the Gold Coast, Australia. And every year when Remembrance Day or Anzac Day would come around a couple of times a year, just start thinking, I felt like I related to them because I've been on the front lines. I mean, I've lived on the front lines, not without a gun, but with my family next to me. And I had to make sure they were protected, little children that were mine. And, I remember I would get hate mail from people saying I was a child abuser and what are you doing with your kids there? And trying to put myself in their shoes, thinking, well, they just don't have any reference to where we live and what we're doing and why. My experience, I'm not a rookie at this. I've been doing this my whole life, really. So just not really relating and to, well, where is the value in doing what I've done here? I mean, there's value if you had a gun in hand and you were fighting, but what if you went to rescue and help? It just, it really made me question a lot, I guess. But again, we don't do these things for self-validation or recognition. We do these things like anybody because we're driven by that North Star, by that deep drive within us. And I think that's just something we have to trust. And I was thinking about, the 1%er here in what we've been sharing, and you use that word Wanderlust, it's a word I love so much. And there is something about giving in, getting lost. We can get so stuck on what we know that we forget the answer actually might be that we need to find is in getting lost. Just get lost. Go wander and feel like you're in a foreign place. Know what it feels like, because you never know what you will discover when you practice the art of getting lost, of Wanderlust. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I mean,
Makes total
you're
sense.
the athlete
No.
in the house.
Just
Do you
because I
find
get
that?
lost on the trails. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. I mean, I get lost in a PowerPoint presentation that I have to do for work. I get lost in an Excel spreadsheet, and I get lost on the trails. It's exactly the same thing, you know. It's like you want to go, you know, if someone gives me a task to do, I kind of delve into it, and then I'll just see how it evolves, you know. It's all this outside the box thinking, you know. People who have this Wanderlust or Wanderlust, they're a similar type of person. They don't need a structure as such. Their structure is not made up on the way or along the way, but it's kind of, yeah, let's give it a go. And, you know, the worst thing is always, oh, what if, you know, if I wouldn't have come to Australia, if I wouldn't have gone to the UK, and if my parents wouldn't have gone to South Africa and all this kind of stuff, and your parents wouldn't have gone to Papua, you know, in Indonesia and all these kind of things, you know, we'd be different people, you know. And no, I think this is fantastic, and I'm really grateful for you to, you know, you're sharing your life story here very openly, and that gives the audience a very good idea of what they're up against over the next few months and years listening to us. Some of it will be less serious, I promise, but we needed to obviously introduce ourselves in a way where people understand this is what we want to do. We're passionate about this, and, you know, just rounding out a little bit, you know, we want to thank people, of course, for tuning in. This is a journey we're taking together. We decided we'll do this together. We have similarities. We're not 100% the same. We will have different views on things, and this is what's going to make these discussions very interesting, because we've got two different views. I come from a different area. You come from a different area.
Oh, mate.
And I think if people connect with us on this platform, it'll be fantastic. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, I have so enjoyed not only our conversations. Every time we get together, it just seems like we could talk for hours, and we promise not to do that on this podcast. We promise to try and keep these fairly short and sharp. I reckon if our listeners went away today and just thought about, how can I get lost in my story? Go back and start asking yourself your questions of where you came from. That question you asked me at the beginning, that just made me think, you know, what is that question again? Like, what makes you? What makes
Tim?
Get lost in your story, get lost in that journey, and you'll be surprised what you might uncover that unlocks the next stage in your journey, in elite performance, in growth and development, in improvement. And I think there's something there in that. So thanks for allowing me to get lost a little in my own story and talk about some things that I haven't really talked about in a while. So I appreciate that.
A great example how to dissect your own story. Well done. Okay, thank you very much,
All
Tim.
right.
Dear audience, we'll see you soon, or you'll hear us very soon. Yeah, drop us a line. We'd love to know about your story.
Thanks for tuning in to the One Percenters podcast. That's a wrap for another episode, and we're proud to be recording from Australia on Kombumerri and Gadigal country. And we honour the traditions and knowledge of the First Nations people and pay our respects to elders, past and present. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. We want to hear from you, your questions or topics you would like us to cover, and you can easily do that in the Spotify app. And for those of you that are ready to discover your peak performance edge today, just head on over to our website. That is top.coach. That's TOPP.coach. And start unlocking your unlimited potential with us today. We would love to work with you. And that's it for now. Until next time, what are you waiting for? Get after it.